Welcome to the debate. Imagine a teenager walking into a community youth center on a rainy Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, painting a picture, I like it.
Right. So, to an informal, community-based youth worker, that is just a young person looking for a safe space to breathe, to connect and just exist. But if we shift the lens to a highly formalized, state-funded professional structure, the question totally changes.
Oh, absolutely. They stop being just a kid.
Exactly. Does that teenager suddenly become like a target demographic? Are they a truancy risk? Or just a metric to be tracked on a spreadsheet somewhere?
And that is the exact tension we are wrestling with today. I mean, historically, we operated under the assumption of a knowable future. Society essentially handed young people a map.
A map that made sense at the time.
Right. If you followed the roads, school, training, entering the workforce, you would inevitably arrive at stability. But today, the map doesn't match the territory at all. The landscape of adolescence is this unstable, unknowable reality. It's marked by gig economy precarity, hyperconnectivity, and just intense mental health pressures.
It's an unmappable terrain. And navigating that modern complexity is the central focus of our discussion today, drawing directly on the insights and frameworks developed by the Youth Work Common Room. We are asking, what is the actual role of the youth worker in this reality?
And we're coming at this from two very different angles.
We are. I will be arguing that to truly support young people today, youth work must embrace rigorous professionalization. I mean, it requires formal status, deep professional credibility, and standardized training. Without that, practitioners lack the tools to handle the severity of these issues, and the field lacks the systemic leverage to secure the funding it so desperately needs.
And I will be arguing that over-professionalizing youth work risks, well, destroying it entirely. While the reality is undoubtedly unknowable right now, institutionalizing youth work as a credentialed profession threatens to bind it to the very rigid, outcomes-obsessed systems it's meant to counteract.
You think this strips the value away?
I do. If we force youth work into a formal mold, we strip away the organic, informal, radical learning that makes it uniquely valuable in the first place.
Well, I think we have to start by looking at the sheer weight of what young people are carrying right now. For the educators and practitioners listening, you know exactly what I mean. We are talking about compounding crises.
Yeah, it's heavy.
It is. Post-pandemic isolation, systemic poverty, years of policy neglect. The era where a good-hearted generalist could just open up a community hall, set out a ping pong table, and call it a day, that's over.
I don't know if it was ever just a ping pong table, but go on.
Fair, but you get my point. Youth work today is a serious, sophisticated educational practice. To stand alongside a young person in this unknowable reality, a worker needs profound professional depth. They really need to lean heavily into established traditions of social pedagogy and critical practice.
Wait, hold on. I want to pause you right there, because social pedagogy and critical practice are exactly the kinds of academic terms that look great in a policy paper, but they can feel completely disconnected from the reality of the floor.
I disagree. They describe the actual work.
But for the people elbow deep in this right now, what does critical practice actually look like on a Tuesday afternoon in a youth center?
That's a fair challenge. Let's ground it. Imagine that same teenager who walked in from the rain. Let's say they immediately start acting out, knocking over chairs, picking fights.
A pretty standard Tuesday sometimes.
Right. A well-meaning generalist might just see a behavioral issue and, ban them for the day to keep the peace. But a practitioner trained in social pedagogy doesn't just manage behavior. They read the environment.
Okay, how?
They use an activity, maybe just sitting down at the video game console with them, to actively map that young person's social reality. They know how to ask the right questions to uncover that, say, the youth's family just received an eviction notice.
So they're getting to the root cause.
Exactly. They possess the critical practice required to safely de-escalate the immediate trauma, connect that youth with housing advocacy, and do so without making the kid feel like a charity case. That isn't just being nice. That is a highly technical, intentional intervention, and it requires enhanced professional knowledge.
Okay, I don't disagree that de-escalation and empathy require immense skill. I really don't. But I come at it from a different way. You are conflating expertise with institutional professionalization.
I don't see those as mutually exclusive.
They aren't, but they aren't the same thing. I completely agree that youth workers are highly skilled experts, but the kind of expertise they wield is relational, it's organic, and it's inherently resistant to the formal standardization you're pushing for.
But how can you have reliable expertise across a whole sector without standardization?
Because the standardization isn't designed to protect the relationship. It's designed to satisfy the state. When you formalize a profession, you inevitably integrate it with state and local government apparatuses.
Which is where the funding is.
Yes, but those apparatuses demand specific, measurable outputs. My concern is the ultimate cost of this drive toward professionalization. Securing professional status sounds wonderful and validating, sure, but the reality is that it forces youth workers to adopt standardized metrics.
I think you're overstating the rigidity of those metrics.
Am I? It institutionalizes the space. The moment you do that, you are no longer just playing a video game to map a kid's reality. You are playing a video game to extract data so you can log a crisis intervention in a state database.
See, that's a really cynical view of how professional frameworks operate. Let's look at how the Youth Work Common Room structures this exact dynamic through what they call targeted universalism.
Oh, here we go with targeted universalism.
It specifically resolves the tension you're worried about. Targeted universalism sets a universal goal, say a sense of belonging or civic agency, for absolutely all young people. But it designs different, highly specific routes for different communities to reach that goal.
Right, a universal goal with targeted routes.
Exactly. It refuses the false binary between having an open-door youth club and providing targeted, specific interventions for high-need youth. Think of it like a modern hospital emergency room.
Okay, let's hear the analogy.
The doors are open to everyone. That is the universal access. It doesn't matter who you are, you can walk through the door. But once you are inside, the treatments are highly specialized based on your specific condition.
Sure.
You wouldn't want a generalist guessing at a diagnosis. You want an elite professional who knows exactly how to target the specific ailment. In youth work, executing that kind of layered, highly technical approach requires rigorous training, so a worker can provide targeted support without stigmatizing the young person.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. The elegance of targeted universalism as a theory is undeniable. On paper, it sounds flawless.
But
let's look at the actual mechanism of targeting within a formalized, state-backed profession. Doesn't the formal requirement to target inherently introduce the very labels that youth work has historically fought against?
not if the practitioner is properly trained to separate the intervention from the identity of the youth.
But the practitioner doesn't exist in a vacuum. The funding systems they operate within do not fund different routes to belonging.
Some of them are starting to.
Very few. Most of them fund interventions for antisocial behavior. They fund truancy reduction programs. The formal structure demands a label to release the resources. If a youth worker is professionally mandated to execute targeted work, they are subtly pressured to look at the young person through the lens of their categorization.
I think you are vastly underestimating the capacity of a trained professional to buffer the young person from that administrative reality.
Okay, let's walk through the mechanics of that buffer then. Imagine a youth worker who has secured their professional credibility and their funding by promising a 20% reduction in local truancy.
A common enough scenario.
Right. When that teenager walks in on a Tuesday, the youth worker is no longer just holding an open, informal space. They have a professional mandate hanging over their head.
Yes, they have a job to do.
So during a completely organic breakthrough conversation about the teenager's anxieties, the worker is mentally calculating, how do I steer this conversation towards school attendance so I can check my metric for the quarter?
That's assuming the worker has no pedagogical integrity.
It's assuming they want to keep their funding. The panoptic gaze of the state has entered the room. The magic of historical youth work was that a kid could walk in and just be a person. Not an at-risk youth, not a target demographic, just a kid. The more integrated the system becomes, the harder it is to protect that radically open sanctuary.
I see why you think that. But let me give you a different perspective. You are talking about sanctuary, and I love the idea of a sanctuary.
Thank you.
But a sanctuary with its doors padlocked because the organization couldn't pay rent isn't helping anyone.
Well, obviously.
We cannot ignore the material reality here. Over the last decade of austerity, public services have been gutted. Funding is causal, not abstract. And when youth work operates completely outside the professional sphere, proudly uninstitutionalized, it just becomes invisible to policymakers.
So we make ourselves visible by mimicking the systems that are already failing young people?
No. We make ourselves visible by establishing what the Youth Work Common Room calls collaboration without dilution. You have to be alongside health, alongside formal education, and alongside social care.
But on whose terms?
On terms of mutual respect. We have to speak their language enough to be respected as equitable partners while maintaining our core educational purpose. Think about a massive municipal building. If youth work is just a temporary extension cord plugged into a hallway socket, the second there's a budget shortfall, someone unplugs you to save the main grid.
That is a painfully accurate metaphor for the last 10 years, honestly.
Exactly. You have to be hardwired into the architecture of public education and social care. If you aren't structurally integrated, you are the first thing cut.
Look, I have to admit, I struggle with this line of reasoning because the funding devastation is very real. The losses from budget cuts are tangible. Fewer trusted adults, closed community centers, way less support.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. But I'm sorry, I just don't buy that integrating into the architecture of the state is the salvation you think it is. Let me tell you why.
Let's hear it.
There is a profound contradiction in your argument. You are arguing for practice grounded in critical theory, social justice, and challenging power dynamics.
Yes.
But simultaneously, you are advocating that youth work beg for validation, professional recognition, and consistent standards from the very policy structures that enacted that brutal austerity in the first place.
It is not begging. That is a total mischaracterization. It is asserting an equitable partnership. It is demanding that the informal learning we facilitate is recognized as a vital, necessary part of the future of education.
But partnership with the vastly more powerful system inevitably leads to co-optation. When you hardwire yourself into that municipal building you mentioned, the building's management dictates when your lights go on and off.
Only if you don't have a strong professional body advocating for you.
The dominant systems, formal schooling, policing, child welfare, they dictate the metrics of success. The danger here is that in the quest to be seen as credible professionals, youth workers slowly morph into mere arms of the state.
That's a huge leap.
Is it? They become an extension of the school's behavioral management team or an informal wing of the juvenile justice system. A youth worker's ultimate loyalty must be to the young person. If their professional status depends on upholding standards defined by the state, they lose their radical edge. They can no longer challenge the system on behalf of the young person because they are fundamentally employed to uphold it.
That argument relies entirely on the assumption that professionalism means blind compliance, and it simply doesn't. A true professional, again, one grounded in deep critical practice, uses their systemic credibility to challenge the architecture from the inside.
That's a very optimistic view of bureaucracy.
It's a realistic view of how change happens. They are the ones who can walk into a multi-agency meeting with schools and police and say, your approach to this young person is causing harm, and here is the pedagogical evidence as to why. You can't do that if you aren't allowed in the room.
But what good is being in the room if you've had to trade away the very environment that allowed the young person to trust you in the first place?
You don't trade it away. The professional depth is exactly what gives the practitioner the capacity to satisfy the systemic requirements while fiercely protecting the youth space. It's not a zero-sum game.
It often feels like one.
Well, the Youth Work Common Room emphasizes this exact point. You need practitioners with the scope to understand complex contexts and make intelligent educational choices. Informal learning isn't just a soft add-on where kids hang out.
No one is saying it is.
But that's how it's treated. It is a highly intentional transformative practice, but you cannot get financial investment to scale that practice without proving its value.
I agree that informal learning is intentional, completely. But I strongly challenge the idea that we have to prove its value using the metrics of formal education.
With educators listening, they might be thinking, well, we already provide social and emotional support in schools. But youth work is distinctly different. It happens in the margins, voluntarily, and it requires a unique professional rigor to sustain. If you insist on remaining this purely organic, uncredentialed entity just to maintain ideological purity, you are essentially volunteering to be defunded, and the young people are the ones who pay the price for that purity.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that if we secure funding by mimicking the professional metrics of formal education, we aren't saving youth work at all? We're just creating a cheaper, informal version of school.
We aren't mimicking school. We are offering an alternative pedagogy with equal rigor.
But the funding mechanisms demand mimicking. You said it yourself. We need to show outcomes to get the investment.
Yes, tailored outcomes.
The moment you promise a measurable outcome to a funding body, you fundamentally alter the environment. The true educational value of youth work lies precisely in its freedom from formal standards. It creates the rare conditions where a young person can take risks, test ideas, and build their voice without the pressure of producing a measurable deliverable at the end of the quarter.
But they still need to be supported safely.
Architecture that is failing young people in schools into the one sanctuary they have left.
Because the architecture of a recognized profession brings support structures. It brings clinical supervision. It brings continuous workforce development. You were talking about the purity of the relationship, but you are ignoring the toll it takes on the worker.
I'm definitely not ignoring worker burnout mode.
But you are ignoring the solution. Navigating the trauma of today's youth without a robust professional framework leads to massive burnout. When work is burnt out, they leave. When they leave, the young person loses that trusted adult anyway. Professionalization sustains the workforce so they can actually be there for the long haul.
And my counter to that is that the more time that practitioner spends navigating the administrative architecture of their new profession, the less time they spend actually in the unmapped terrain with the young person.
It's a balance.
But professionalization inherently brings hierarchy, administration, and standardization. It shifts the center of gravity away from messy, informal, deeply human interaction and pulls it toward compliance, evaluation, and policy alignment. I want to be very clear, I am not arguing for amateurs.
It sounds a bit like you are sometimes.
I'm really not. I am arguing that the expertise required in youth work is fundamentally different from the expertise required to be a credentialed professional in state systems. The moment you standardize this relational work so it can be neatly understood by a government grant committee, you strip away its radical essence.
But if it isn't understood, it isn't valued. And if it isn't valued, it vanishes. Youth work has operated in the terrain of uncertainty and possibility for decades. To continue doing so in this new, highly pressurized, unstable reality, it must evolve into a recognized, equitable partner.
It must evolve, absolutely, but it must fiercely guard its distinctiveness. If youth work becomes indistinguishable from the formal system surrounding it, its disappearance won't even be noticed. It will have simply regulated itself out of existence.
This is a dense, incredibly consequential issue. So let's summarize where we are landing here. My position remains that navigating the unknowable future our young people face today demands rigorous professional depths. The mental health strains, the economic precarities, the pressures are simply too acute for anything less. By leaning into social pedagogy and establishing systemic credibility, youth workers can secure the sustainable funding and equitable partnerships necessary to offer robust, intentional, informal education. Professionalizing is not about mimicking formal schooling. It is about validating youth work as a necessary, distinct, and permanently funded pillar of a young person's development.
And my summary is that while deep expertise and intentionality are absolutely vital, we must fiercely guard the informal, radical nature of youth work against institutional capture.
The capture you see as inevitable.
I do. The drive toward formal professionalization, with its required metrics, state targeting, and systemic alignment, threatens the very core of what makes the practice effective. The freedom from rigid outcomes and the genuine, uncategorized relationships are exactly what allow young people to breathe and thrive in uncertainty. We risk sterilizing the entire practice if we force it into a traditional professional mold just to secure a seat at the table.
Well, I'm not convinced by the idea that structure equals sterilization, but I do think where we fundamentally converge today is on the profound nature of the shift young people are experiencing.
Oh, 100%?
We both agree that the transition away from a historically knowable future places an unprecedented, heavy burden on youth. The old maps really are useless now, and the relationships built in youth work, however those are ultimately structured and funded, are essential to helping them imagine and construct something better.
Absolutely. We are completely aligned on the critical importance of the relationship itself. A trusted adult who meets a young person on their own terms is the best buffer we have against these modern systemic pressures.
Right.
Where we remain divided is simply on the mechanics of protecting that relationship. Does institutional professionalization act as the savior of youth work, giving it the armor and resources to survive? Or does it act as a threat to its core identity, slowly suffocating its radical potential beneath compliance and metrics?
And that is a tension the field will have to continue navigating, hopefully with the kind of intellectual charity we've aimed for today. The ideas we've explored represent just the beginning of a much larger, crucial conversation initiated by the Youth Work Common Room.
Definitely just scratching the surface.
Exactly. So we want to leave it to you, our listeners, to form your own conclusions on this. Does the youth worker of tomorrow need to be a formalized professional equipped to challenge the system from the inside, or a radical guardian of informal space operating outside the state's gaze?
Or perhaps, as we've debated, some nearly impossible alchemy of both. We would really love to hear your thoughts. Please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment with your perspective, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future discussions.
And to dive deeper into these frameworks, we highly encourage you to visit www.youthworkcommonroom.com. There, you can explore the articles and concepts we referenced today and find incredible opportunities around training, consultancy, evaluation, leadership support, and professional supervision.
Yeah, it really is an invaluable resource for anyone committed to this work and trying to navigate these exact tensions.
It really is. The resources there bridge the gap between theory and that Tuesday afternoon reality we've been talking about. So as we sign off, think back to that teenager stepping into the youth center, walking out of the rain and into the unmappable terrain of the modern world. If the old map is useless and they are relying on a compass to navigate the unstable reality ahead, well, who do you want standing beside them, helping them read it?
And just as importantly, what rules are we forcing that guide to follow?
Until next time.